You're welcome to the business segment here on Joy News Prime. And yes, I am going to lead the business segment. But Sandra Afenu, who is the business segment anchor, is also here. Hello, Sandra.
Hi. It's been an eventful afternoon.
It has been. Yeah. It has been. And George Yafi is also here. He's also with the business desk. It was all because of the major announcement that was made by the governor of the central bank earlier today. This happened in the last few hours. Now, a major announcement was made regarding the revocation of the licenses of some of the banks and the consolidation of some of them. So the governor announced the merger of 6 banks and the revocation of the license of 2 others, and it's all because of the challenges in meeting the deadline for the new minimum capital requirements. Of course, there were some other incidents or reasons cited by the central bank governor for the revocation of the licenses. Now, 5 other banks will be receiving support, and these are largely indigenous banks. And GN Bank has been downgraded from a universal bank to a savings and loans company. Let's start off with the central bank governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, making that announcement at the Bank of Ghana.
The minimum capital directive was part of regulatory measures that were aimed at strengthening the banking sector to make it more resilient to shocks, as well as to help position the banks to better support the growing needs of the Ghanaian economy. It was also the expectation of the Bank of Ghana that the recapitalization exercise would help promote consolidation in the banking industry through sustainable mergers and acquisitions, along with stronger corporate governance structures and risk management systems and practices. Following the recapitalization exercise that has just ended at the end of December 2018, we now have 23 universal banks operating in Ghana. These banks have all met the new minimum paid-up capital of 400 million Ghana cedis. In particular, 16 banks have met the new minimum paid-up capital requirement of 400 million through the capitalization of income surplus and fresh capital injection.
All right, so the governor also went on to talk about the banks that failed to meet the minimum capital requirements. One of them, he mentioned, had to do with the GN Bank. Let's listen.
GN Bank was unable to comply with the minimum capital directive by 31st December 2018. Consequently, the bank has applied for and Bank of Ghana has approved the grant of a savings and loans company license. The bank has also approved a transition plan submitted by GN for winding down aspects of its business which are not compatible with the savings and loans company license. The Bank of Ghana will closely monitor implementation of the approved transitional plan, which is expected to be completed by the end of June 2019. In this regard, the bank has also appointed an advisor for GN Bank pursuant to Section 101 of the Banks and Specialized Deposit Taking Institutions Act of 2016 to advise the management of GN with a view to ensuring a smooth transition to a viable savings and loans company. The advisor will hold office until otherwise advised by the Bank of Ghana and will furnish the Bank of Ghana with a status report on GN Bank within 3 months and as frequently as the Bank of Ghana may require.
All right, so in reaction to this announcement by the central bank governor, we have a statement coming from GN Bank, and I will be sharing that statement with you. But the Bank of Ghana governor had to say, or had some other things to say regarding some other banks, Premium Bank and Heritage Bank. George Yafi was at the news conference, and he's here with us. So, George, you tell us, what did the governor have to say about Premium Bank and the Heritage Bank?
So, just like what happened to Capital and Unibank, Consolidated Bank has taken over the good assets of these banks. So if you deposit with the Premium or Heritage, tomorrow morning, if you want to do Saturday banking, you just walk into your branch, you still get access to your cash, but the bank is now being managed by a consolidated bank as a bank. And therefore, when you talk about the bad asset, just like what happened to Unibank and Capital and the other banks again, Vish Ashegba has been appointed as the receiver to go after these bad assets, the ones that he has to auction them and use to take care of this cost. So nothing has changed. You still have access to your bank accounts, but under a different management.
All right. Now, it's interesting what the governor had to say on the back of the decisions they've taken or actions they've taken on Premium Bank and Heritage Bank. What exactly did he say?
Well, he was talking about the fact that Premium was insolvent. They haven't got good capital, or they don't have enough money to meet their financial obligations.
Okay. So they were insolvent, and he gave a date as of 30th November 2018.
Yeah, but again, the governor even sought to explain that looking at the numbers again, they should have taken that action long before. But purely to layman say they didn't have enough money, as any commercial bank should have, in order to stay in business. And there are regulatory requirements that you should have X amount of money to cover for your risk as a bank. They didn't have that. They were actually far, far below that. And therefore, Bank of Ghana thought that they have to take a position on them right now.
In other words, there probably would have been a decision taken on them when the Bank of Ghana decided to consolidate the five
other banks. Yes, you're right.
But decided to hold off.
Because remember, we reported on there was one bank that was on life support, and if that life support is taken, they're supposed to be closed down, and that was Premium.
And then Heritage Bank is the other issue.
There were issues about how they raised their minimum capital requirement. And some of the issues are in court. It has to do with Cocoa Board and some project that Cocoa Board gave to them to execute. And it also has to do with computation of how they define what the stated capital is and whether they really have that capital. So there are issues around their stated capital, and Bank of Ghana thought that irrespective of the case in court, they believe that they don't have a good capital position, they cannot meet the minimum capital requirement, and therefore let's withdraw the license.
Okay. Now, one other assurance that was given by the central bank governor had to do, or went mainly for the depositors of these banks that have been affected. The governor made it clear that nobody is going to lose their deposits and that you can go to your bank and transact with business as usual. But Sandra Esinamapenu was also monitoring the announcement, the news conference given by the central bank governor, and you're taking it from a different angle, which had to do with the state banks.
Yes, we start with the National Investment Bank, and as we know right now, they've appointed an advisor to oversee their process, and after that they'll finish the Bank of Ghana with the whole process. So we go for that soundbite and we'll come back.
The government has notified the Bank of Ghana that it intends to restructure NIB through governance and management reforms, as well as streamlining its business model to help refocus it as a bank on industrialization. To help ensure that these reforms succeed, the Bank of Ghana today has appointed an advisor for NIB, pursuant to Section 101 of the Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act of 2016, that is Act 930. The advisor would advise the management of the bank with a view to helping improve the affairs of the bank. This advisor would hold office until otherwise advised by the Bank of Ghana and will furnish the bank with a status report on NIB within 3 months and as frequently as the Bank of Ghana may require.
So as we know, GN Bank has actually been downgraded from a commercial bank, to a savings and loans, and they have been reacting. And Israel, you have that press release from GN Bank. What have they been saying?
All right, so the press release from GN Bank says GN Bank will remain Ghanaian with a national retail network to promote financial inclusion. And it goes on to say the shareholders, directors and management of GN Bank wish to inform our cherished customers and the general public that we have elected to continue our operations as a savings and loans institution. This means that our doors will remain open for business as usual in January 2019 and beyond. We have started the transition process. Our immediate objective is to find the liquidity needed to service the needs of customers. This means that as a licensed deposit-taking institution, customer funds remain safe with us. And it goes on to say that the decision allows us to concentrate on ensuring maximum liquidity to sustain the business instead of raising funds for additional capital instead of raising funds for additional capital to operate as a universal bank. We operated in the recent past successfully as a savings and loans company for 8 years. So we can assure our customers that with our attention back to managing the business, instead of combing the world for additional capital, we're poised to deliver products and services beyond excellence. It is necessary for us to also to point out that in the process of looking for additional capital, we made a conscious decision not to sell our bank to mostly foreign interests. These investors wanted the retail network we have built, but with the intention to abandon our vision of promoting financial inclusion and serving the needs of ordinary Ghanaians. We have been honest about who we are, a Main Street bank and not a high street bank. And it goes on, we formed the company and started looking for a license in 1997 to create a national bank for all Ghanaians wherever they may live, capable of ensuring financial inclusion and bringing the unbanked into the formal sector. It took the founding shareholder, Coconut Grove Beach Resort, 9 years and a lot of effort to obtain a license from the Bank of Ghana on May 8, 2006 to operate as a savings and loans company under the brand name First National Savings and Loans Company Limited. And it goes on, and in conclusion, it says we will continue to be a financial institution with a difference, go where others are not willing to go, to bring banking to people currently excluded from the foreign banking sector throughout the country. And this is signed by Head of GN Corporate Affairs, Frank Owusu Ofori. So interesting release coming from GN Bank. Essentially, they're confirming that yes, the decision to downgrade them is not really a bad thing, and that it just takes them back to the business the terrain they're very used to, which is banking the people who typically the commercial banks won't target.
Right, you're right, and that was the statement from them. I mean, this has actually gotten a whole lot of people talking, because throughout the year, GN Bank has been assuring us that they were sound, they were not having liquidity issues, and we also know that they went outside Ghana to acquire some asset as well. So it's come as a surprise to a lot of people who have been interacting with us on our social media platform. And I want to bring in George here. George, will you say you're surprised that GN Bank has been brought to where they are now?
Well, for them, they claim that they requested to get to the state when they realized that they couldn't have met the capital requirement. So for anybody who has been following the industry or developments in the industry, it was just a matter of time when this action would be actually taken, because at a point in time, we knew that they were contesting Bank of Ghana on whether they had the stated capital or they don't have the stated capital. So it was just a matter of time, as in when would the regulators strike on GN Bank with respect to them having enough capital or having enough money to meet their obligations as a commercial bank. And for a lot of people monitoring, this afternoon we reported that was the bank that was going to be downgraded to savings and loans, and the action has actually taken off.
It's quite interesting for our viewers who are watching us right now. I think for a lot of people, they are confused as to what it means to bring a bank down to a savings and loan. So if my money was with GN Bank and now that they've been reduced to a savings and loan, what happens to me?
Your money is safe. Nothing has changed. A savings and loans can't take deposit from the public, so everything is safe there. The universal banking license allows you to virtually do everything as a financial institution. That is why you have some banks going into real estate, going into insurance, and the critical part of it is being able to play in the forex market space. So you can still transact in dollars, pounds, and all those things, take those deposits directly, do foreign transactions based in dollars, pounds, and all those things. If you're not a universal banking license, a bank or a bank that holds a universal banking license, you can't do certain services. So there are some restrictions on you, and that is what is happening right now. Nothing changes if you don't have the license, but you can virtually do everything. So GN now has had some restrictions on the things it can do as a deposit-taking institution. That is all. But in terms of your money, it's safe. If they want to take on certain transactions, they cannot take the money directly from the public. They have to do that through another commercial bank, another bank that has a universal banking license.
So what are some of the things they can do?
FX, in terms of directly engaging in dollar, pound, euro transactions. You can't do that. It has to be done by a bank that has a universal banking license. You can also not take on certain transactions because you are not a universal bank. They have to pass that through another bigger bank as well. So there are some restrictions on FX. There are some restrictions on you even directly receiving certain amounts of money from outside the country. You have to also pass it through another institution that has a universal banking license. So there are some restrictions on basically the things that you can do. But in terms of deposit taking, anyone who has an account to GN, you can still walk there tomorrow and do your transaction.
So what about those who are talking about gold code securities, because they're a bit linked to GN Bank, the same company is dealing with them. So if I am dealing with gold code securities and GN Bank is affected, is it likely to have an impact on people who have deposits?
Not at all. As I'm saying, that savings and loans are allowed to take deposits from the public. So you can do certain normal practices that any commercial bank can do. But there are restrictions on you taking on huge monies. There are restrictions on you exposing yourself to dollar, pounds, euro transactions. As a savings and loans, you just cannot do that. You can also not directly engage investors and bring in some money directly into your bank. You have to place it with another bank that has an investor banking license. So that is what will happen. It will not in any way affect their investment wing because they are also allowed to do investment and they can place those investments to the savings and loans or even do with another commercial bank. So they've just been restricted to doing certain transactions, but they're still allowed to do other things that any deposit-taking institution can do. And that's what GN has.
All right, let me bring in
now,
Israel.
Okay, so George, you indicated that some of the things, or one of the things they can't do as a savings and loans company is to take Forex.
Right.
Yes.
Now, I can imagine that they would have customers who have Forex accounts with the bank. What happens?
That is why an advisor has been appointed. So that advisor is going to supervise the process to tell them that, okay, for instance, because you are not allowed to do this, I want to move all your FX accounts to a different bank. And that advisor is going to advise them because he has the authority of the Bank of Ghana that you are not allowed to hold FX.
Yeah.
So let's move that FX to another bank that has the universal banking license.
Right. And so one other issue, and this issue GN Bank has had to deal with this issue for a while now. People trying to get their deposits from the bank and they being unable to because they're having some liquidity challenges, even though they didn't quite admit that they're having liquidity challenges.
If you read through the statement, now they were saying that they will now concentrate on their institution instead of going out to look for, if I got that right, to look for money, if I got that right. It means that in trying to meet this capital requirement, other liquid positions that, or other monies that they had, they were looking at fighting to get the status. So if you don't need investor banking license again, or you don't need to up your capital to 400 million Ghana cedis again, then maybe you can concentrate or plow those monies back and then use to deal with your operation.
It is something that I would have wished that they would have indicated in their press release by telling their customers that you were unable to retrieve or were unable to pay you whatever funds that you have with us. Now that we are a savings and loans company, maybe we're getting fresh injection of some money.
They might not have stated it explicitly in that statement, but again, engaging some of them behind the scenes, and I'm saying that I don't know whether it was captured well in this statement, but they had to do other things to bring in the fresh capital to meet the 400 million Ghana cedis.
Whatever fresh capital they have to bring in has nothing to do with the depositors' funds.
But
the
I'm saying that
if,
for instance, they can take monies from a subsidiary, that money that they were taking was looking at meeting the minimum cap. Now that you are not required again to do that, that liquid position can be advanced to depositors where I'm saying that I'm giving you a reason why they might have had problems in meeting those obligations.
I think it will be helpful if they themselves came out to actually assure their customers regarding the challenges they're having or the customers are having in trying to retrieve deposits. But just to give you a global picture of what actually took place, we have done some infographics which we will be sharing with you. Essentially, a major announcement has been made today, and 30 banks existed as of October 2018. As of January 4th, 2019, 16 banks have met the minimum capital requirement of 400 million cedis. Currently, 23 banks have met the minimum capital requirement of 400 million cedis, and the 23 would have required that there were some measures, and the measures that the governor has talked about. So we have 23 of them as of the announcement that was made today, Friday, the 4th of January. So the banks that have been approved for mergers, we have First Atlantic Merchant Bank Limited and Energy Commercial Bank. So the two will become one bank. We do not know what name they will be known as. George, do you have any idea?
That might be early days yet, but a quick one. The First Atlantic Bank, or the first FNB, and then GHL. FNB is rather acquiring GHL. It's not a merger. What we picked up is that they are taking over GHL, and it's not a merger.
All right. Okay, so FNB, First National Bank, is the South African
the South African-based bank. And then, but it's early days here in Israel, because even the legal issues, finding those documents, you understand, it's work in progress.
It will take a while. So the other bank approved for measures, Omni Bank and Bank Sahel Sahara. George, do you have any scoop on these two?
So they are also almost, it's more of, so let's say that the parent company of Sahel Bank is bringing in some money. Jospon Group is also bringing in some money, and they had to turn to the Ghana Amalgamated Trust. This is a company brought together by some private pension fund managers, and they pumped in about 120 million Ghana cedis as well. So this is how things look like, and depending on who brought in fresh cash and all the rest, the fine details will secure that very soon in terms of the shareholding. But again, we also understand that they are fine-tuning the agreement in terms of appending their signatures to the legal issues as to how things have gone right now, who's brought in this capital, the amount of money you've taken from the Ghana Amalgamated Trust and all those things. So it's more work in progress. The committee on this particular bank, they're going to meet on Tuesday to again fine-tune the HR personnel. And don't forget, another critical thing is the integration of systems as well.
Yeah.
Because if, for instance, somebody who was premium, they're using a different system, and now that a different bank has taken over,
the banking
I should be able to,
different.
if I'm using a different ATM, that software should be able to accommodate me as well. So that's something that behind the scenes, they are working on all those things, 24 hours and all the rest, to ensure that this thing is done as fast as possible. With consolidated banks, some also complain about the fact that they're taking on too much. Government said that they've given them bonds, they're not liquid. What the governor said today is that they've taken on those bonds and given them cash. So they will be more liquid and to meet their financial obligations.
So the other banks that have been approved for merger, First National...
And that's the acquisition, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, so First National Bank and Ghana GHL Bank. Now, the GN Bank has up to June 2019 to fully transition into a savings and loans company. The Bank of Ghana has also appointed an advisor for NIB to advise management of the bank with a view to helping improve the affairs of the bank.
All right, so it's been a rocky year, 2018, for the banking sector. We saw all those measures. We saw banks that have collapsed, and the system was quite not favorable for a lot of businesses. But, George, I want to find out from you, with all these happenings, will we say the woes of the banking sector, it's over?
You won't say it's over in the sense that now you are being told that even though you made the 400 million Ghana cedis, that's just a minimum. Now, the Bank of Ghana has introduced something they call the risk-based banking operation. So if, for instance, maybe an Israeli bank, depending on your dealings as a bank, the 400 million Ghana cedis might not be now, you'll be asked to again increase your capital again. So it's rather the start of new things, strict regulations that again will rather see another round of measures again in this industry when it comes to staying in business. But
some financial analysts have argued that raising the minimum capital requirement is not really the issue, but there are several factors in the banking sector that could actually stabilize the economy. We have the CD depreciation all the time, and we understand that is also having some sort of effect on the banks. So do you think that moving forward, raising the capital requirements would bring out the issue, or it goes beyond just the increment of the minimum
clearly
capital requirements?
What you've seen in what has happened shows that a more stricter court regulations and having adequate capital as a bank is critical. So if Bank of Ghana is going to operate itself in a way that they're going to ensure that everybody complies with what they have to comply. You're supposed to have a certain minimum capital as a bank to operate. Your capital adequacy ratio is going to be observed, reviewed, your numbers and all those things. Being more active on the market and the players. I think that just like what Andani said, that is, who is the president of the Organization of Bankers, all that things being equal, by the middle of this year, everything should be smooth for every bank.
Do you have any news on the savings and loan sector?
It's too early yet, but we'll be getting to that side very soon.
All right. So, Israel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra Fanu and George Uafi, for bringing us the analysis on the big announcement that was made today by the governor of the central bank. Just by way of recap, the Bank of Ghana has announced the measure of 6 banks and the revocation of the license of 2 others of their challenges in meeting the deadline for the new minimum capital requirement. 5 other banks will be receiving support, whilst GN Bank has been downgraded from a universal bank to a savings and loans company. We have had a reaction from GN Bank regarding their downgrade. You're watching Joy News Prime with